Welcome, everyone, to the MASSP podcast. My name is Ryan Casey. Today, we talk to Bay City Central Assistant Principal and MASSP Board of Directors member Ben Berger as he talked about the TIE program at his school. This unique program allows for a group of freshmen to take a block course that integrates U.S. history, biology, and English 9 to be taught all at once with a group of teachers. During our conversation, Ben shares their why behind this approach and how it has transformed in year 2, as well as some of the other positive outcomes beyond just student achievement. Enjoy. So enjoy your ride to or from school, your run on the treadmill, or however you like to listen, because another MASSP podcast episode starts now. Well, Ben, thanks so much for taking time on a busy Monday in the fall here to be on the MASSP podcast. Really appreciate you giving us your time today.
Ryan, it's an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and it's a pleasure to represent MASSP, and it's a pleasure to be a Trojan on this Monday.
Awesome. So, Ben, I asked you on the podcast today because a little while ago, by the time this comes out, this recording, at a recent MASSP Board of Directors meeting, we did a little board share as part of the agenda where different, principals and leaders got to kind of share out some interesting things that they have going on in your building. And it seemed like you had a popular session there as you were talking about Traverse City Central's integrated curriculum program that you started doing. And so I just thought it would be a great conversation to have. I think people would be interested in learning more about this. So can you just kind of start at the top level? Like what is this curriculum program and how does it kind of work?
Yeah, absolutely, Ryan. And it's called the Trojan Integrated Experience, or the TIE program. So I'm not a big acronym guy, but if you hear me say TIE program, that's what I'm referencing. And so that is a program that takes, we run a 6-period day here at Central. And it takes the first 2 hours, so from 8:05 till just after 10, and puts 4 teachers in a classroom with roughly 50 kids. And so in our 6-period day on that pie chart, a 2-hour chunk is devoted to that group of 54 individuals, 50-ish kids, and 4 teachers, grouping dynamically to cover core curriculum in English 9, in biology, and in U.S. history.
Oh, man, I have so many questions now. This sounds really interesting. So 4 teachers, 50 kids. What if I were to walk into that room, what would I see?
Yeah, so a lot was put into helping this program be successful. And I'm sure we'll get into talking about the why for that program. But one of the things was moving all of the teachers physically next door to each other. So the 4th teacher that I've kind of left off titling is a special ed teacher. So there are my 3 core content and a special ed teacher. And so there are 4 classrooms. I'm actually looking out my office at them right now. And they're in a location where there's movable wall, and in 4 right next to each other. So those groups have decided to start each morning with an SEL circle. And so they have, if you walked in right in the morning, you'd see each of those 4 circles going on. And that's kind of their homeroom report. And then after that 10 minutes, they group dynamically based upon what the activities the various kids are doing to demonstrate or work towards mastery.
So in that classroom then, once they get past kind of that initial first phase and that SEL kind of piece to start the day, they're kind of breaking into different pods, if you will, or groups to kind of cover, then they do that and rotate? Is there certain groups that would go longer based on needs and then others might have a shorter time? I'm just still curious about.
Yeah, so you really answered the end of that answer to the answer is yes, because the big challenge was we learned as adults in starting this program that we have only experienced school one way. We've experienced it as a student one way, we've studied how to teach one way, and then we've been professional teachers in one way. And so the biggest challenge for this team, and when we come together for our meetings, is keep checking each other on if we're drifting too far back into the status quo. So I don't want them rotating when the first bell rings in between first and second hour. I don't want them traveling as cohort pockets to each teacher. So that's not what it looks like. So it might look like today I had the special ed teacher working with the biology teacher, and they were doing their own thing while there was two different groups with the other two teachers. And so that activity might take 58 minutes and the others might take 10, and then they're working there. Which gets to the other thing that is a big part of it. There's one grade book, Ryan. So one grade book, it is skills-based reporting, AKA evidence-based grading, or, there's different names for it, but there is one grade book which allows us to do it because it's all skills-based.
So, I mean, I'm a former high school principal here, so I know that obviously freshman year can be a very challenging year. I mean, where do you see the most dropout rate? I mean, I shouldn't say drop rate, excuse me. The most failures typically are at the grades 9 and 10, right? And kids struggling. Most of your kids in certain MTSS systems you're pulling from freshmen. So was that kind of the reasoning behind why you guys wanted to try a different approach? Was it a different reason? I'm curious what the why was behind this shift.
So the why really came about equal parts my frustration with those results that you just listed are pretty present in every single high school. And I really, I get frustrated with responses to why being, well, that's the way we've always done it. And so I think that I've worked in this building for a decade and 8 years as a principal. And so my people know that about me. And so these 4 teachers, the second part to the success of this program is it's all teacher driven. So these 4 teachers and I met in spring 2 years ago, and I kind of put on them because they met because they were frustrated with how things were going. These were my freshman teachers, and they knew I had frustrations. And so we came together to brainstorm how to make those better. And so it was really neat because we found each other. And then our guiding practice had come out of that meeting was we drew a map knowing most of our goal in the freshman year and 10th grade year is getting a lot of these kids to a career tech center program. And so we have a 2-year bridge where we're just trying to put bandages and trying to do what we can. And then we've seen the spark hit when they're juniors or when they're welding or when they're doing these different things. And so we said, well, where are those kids as 9th and 10th graders? And we didn't want your biggest behavior problem. We didn't want your lowest student because we have services for both of those. But that kind of became our backwards planning is really defining what kind of student we were looking for. And it was those fall between the cracks. It was those don't connect always. It was those, we were doing a lot of studying as a staff about school safety. So it was about some of those kids and building community. And so the 2 things that became our North Stars were, where are these career tech kids as 9th and 10th graders? And then what is the profile of a Trojan integrated experienced student?
And that gets you to this pocket of roughly 50 students that kind of meet these different characteristics or specific needs that would then be successful in a different approach in this TIE program.
Absolutely. And so a couple things, because year 1, no one knows about it. And so we're having to peddle it, sell it, really work hard. Year 2, we already saw requests in to the point where we had to cap it. And our biggest mode of getting students, the right student, is good communication and alignment with our 8th grade staff. And so we spend time in the spring really educating their staff and principals on the program so they can give us the best data possible in those names. And then there are commitments I've made, as a principal, we know we're removed from the classroom, but my job, the commitments I have made are removing roadblocks that I can. And so we are really fluid beyond our add drop period with that program, knowing that the makeup of kids in that class is really important to its success. And so we spend a lot of time with the 8th grade parents, and then we've educated our community a lot in like our 8th grade and the 9th grade nights on what that program is. And we saw the fruits of that from the experiences kids had last year and then to the registration numbers this year.
Okay, I was going to ask. So it sounds like obviously starting out, your teachers were the driving force, were on board. But I was curious about especially with that first pilot group, what were the students on board right away, or what about the parents? I was curious. It sounds like you've done some educating to those groups along the way. Maybe now it's less of an issue, but was it a little challenging at first, or not too bad?
It was really challenging at first, and it was challenging so much so too that the 4 teachers are really neat because they each have unique skill sets, and they're not like best of friends beyond that. The commonality was that they all identified what we were doing wasn't the best option for certain kids. Some kids, it's fine. It works wonderfully, but it's not the best option for kids we were really wanting some movement with. And so that was the uniting factor. So it really was, Ryan, about January of that first year. So 1 semester in, where the gloves kind of came off of being nice to each other in our meetings, and nice meaning we weren't being crucial in our feedback. We weren't calling each other out. And there was a lot of passiveness to that. And I witnessed this shift change when they were comfortable enough with each other to be direct, and it ended in a great product. And they're like, oh, you're feeling that too? I am as well. And so the key was the dynamics with my 4 teachers growing into where they're doing all their own checking, balancing, planning, pushing. And the kids reacted to that when they started setting up a more dynamic experience for the kids. That first semester, it was really impatient, going slow, knowing where we wanted to get. And the kids would probably tell you it felt very similar. And it was like just seeing that light and staying true to where we wanted to get. That the light bulb happened about a semester in.
That's awesome. So you started talking a little bit too, kind of the results of this work, shifting into this year, having to maybe cap those numbers. What else have the results told you? Are you changing your approach? Are you seeing things tied to growth and achievement, or maybe behaviorally? I'm just curious. Not that was the target of this group, anyways, but I'm just curious about what are some things you've seen that you've gone through it for a year and you're already starting it on year 2.
Yeah, I think the things that we saw were another benefit was when we're now putting 3 core classes into 2 hours. So all of these students get an extra elective in their school day. And so that was another big draw. Like, school's not for everyone. The assembly line of going to different hours isn't for everyone. So now I've got 1 math class that I need to get outside of these 2 hours, and then the rest is elective. So we were really selective, saying, wow, yeah, Ryan really is good after lunch, or he's tired after lunch. Let's put him in a weights class. He loves weights. And so your afternoon now might be weights, arts, and gym. And like, that is totally a game changer for us.
Yeah.
Being selective in how we're doing it down to the hour with these kids. If we can take care of that in the morning, then we're good there. We're giving them an extra half credit to boost any hiccups that may come down the road. And then to go back to the one thing that is like a game changer above all else is there's 1 grade book. So what we do is it's evidence-based grading. So it's skills-based, and it's on mastery. So there's no late points. There's no point collecting. There's none of that garbage that I just can't stand. And because of that, Ryan, last year's cohort had such a high success rate in passing, because then we extrapolate out onto the transcripts at the end of the semester. If you had an A in tie on your schedule, well, no one knows what that is. So then our registrar takes it out, and you have an A in bio, you have an A in English, and then you have an A in US history. And so all of those kids, the pass rates were infinitely higher than having those be separate classes with different bosses telling you different ways to do things. And those are our kids that really struggle with change and things like that. And so going skills-based and project-based within that was the other thing, is really great. Like, these kids yesterday just presented to us, they each had to pick an issue to enrich the school, and they're seeing it through. So some kid wanted a half pipe in the courtyard for lunch, and the group of kids did everything to plan that. And then their teachers are giving them credit and the skills as they go through that.
I'm going to see you doing some ollies on the half pipe at
absolutely
lunch, maybe, man. Yeah, exactly. That's great. I tell you what, I didn't catch that earlier when we had chatted the extra elective hour, because as most educators know, like, there really is not a lot of choice in those first couple of years of high school. And it's, the kids are just, especially kids who need those other courses to be able, as you said, burn off steam or just use a different half of their brain or whatnot. And typically we're like, oh, these are the classes you have to take for the next 2 years. Sorry. you get one elective in there. And so that's a really, as you mentioned, a game changer. I think about that program that is really neat. So do you think, Ben, that this approach you're doing with freshmen, can we apply this to sophomores and world history, physical science, the next level of algebra, whatever it might be, or even, going up the spectrum or trying it with different types of courses? I'm just curious.
I think that this has shown that we are the biggest preventers or roadblocks into drastically changing how we help kids earn what the state has said they need to earn a diploma. And so that's my mindset always. So, we've got a different cohort that could be a different podcast that deals with our STEM kids that are really into that. I think the shadow side to that, though, is funding, FTE, as we all know. And to speak to that, we really had to push some of our staff in opening up elective options to some. We have electives in our course book that were listed as 11th and 12th grade options with no justification other than that's just how it's been. So if I have a 9th grade TIE student that wants to take intro to psych, they're taking intro to psych. There's no justification for why they can't. And so a push on our system was with staff kind of changing offering options to make it more diverse. But I think the finance part that we haven't spent time talking to is that can be a little bit sobering in forcing us to be strategic.
I was going to say, because when people first hear this, they say, oh, 4 teachers, 50 kids. We're at 12 and a half kids per teacher, which is awesome for teaching and for learning, right? That's an awesome student teacher ratio, but obviously it requires a lot of staff. And as you mentioned, the business office has to be on board, and you're gonna have to be strategic in other areas in which you can make this all work. But man, it really does sound amazing. I'm glad it seems like you guys are having a lot of success with it so far. I usually end with a question like this, Ben, because we have different listeners that come from different types of settings for their school. Some are larger schools, some are, I have a rural school, small school background, right? And so I'm trying to think of ways that others could still attempt to implement a program like this. And I'm just curious, what advice would you give? What are some pitfalls that you would suggest they try to avoid that maybe you would have done different, the second time around? And, what would you recommend they do if they want to try to attempt an integrated curriculum approach like this as well?
I think that from a principal lens, who is our target audience, I think I would try to identify, like, anything you're going to do should be built on efficacy of the staff. So I think I would try to identify staff members who or have a sense that they want to push the status quo, or they're up for something different. Because I don't think that something different has to be the Trojan integrated experience like we have. I think that it would be a victory if we had more teachers using evidence-based reporting. I think it would be a victory if we had, project-based learning at the center of that, and like more authentic spaces for kids to do things that are hands-on. Another thing, like a late plug, is that each kid now in year 2 is experiencing 4 different community rotations, where a huge part of the TIE program is that connection to community. And so we've got a local bike organization where kids go and take apart and fix bikes. We've got the animal shelter. We've got Women's Resource Center. We've got a food co-op. And so each kid rotates, and then they pick their choice. And then once a week, they go with staff. One of my teachers, they go and they work there, and they're doing those things. And again, all of that's being assessed by the teacher for those skills. So I think that finding people who want to do things differently and being creative, and then as a principal, your job is kind of creating that playground for them to operate in. And I think that I've had to move out of the way of it, and I've had to be patient, but my staff would really appreciate, like, I get them once a quarter, they get a day out of planning, and then they have common prep. So there's things that I do to ensure that they have the space to work through it.
So as you mentioned earlier, you're really removing those barriers to allow them to do what they do best. And so, and I do like what you mentioned about, a principal or a building leader, decision maker can come up with this great whatever program. And if you try and force people into it all the time, and it's not organic and it's not led by the teachers or the students, you may not get as much success with efficacy and things like that, as you mentioned. So I really just love hearing about this program. Next time I'm up in Traverse City, I might just have to pop in and take a look at this so I can, get a better, visual of what this all looks like, because it just sounds really, really amazing. And I would say that those students who are in that program are pretty darn lucky. So that's really cool. Great job.
Thanks, Ryan. Please do, because my vision is that we become a place where people do come to see it, because I think that anytime my staff are talking about the why, or even just through this podcast, I get a better, concrete, more understanding of our why. And so that's the great professional development that happens when I send them to present, or we talk to community members about it, because they get more affirmed in why they're doing it.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate your time, Ben. I'm glad that the program's in year 2. I look forward to seeing what all comes from it in the continued years down the road. Enjoy the rest of your week, and have a great night.
Ryan, thank you so much.
And that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you for listening to the MASSP podcast. Remember, you can listen to this podcast and others anywhere you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Just search for MASSP or hit the subscribe button right now.